Hello everyone, this is Naren with MS. I am Naren and it's time for the second episode of What MS Taught Me. And this episode is going to be something that might be a little new because I don't think I've mentioned it beforehand. So let's get started. I think the one thing that MS has definitely taught me is that never underestimate yourself or your abilities. Now, one thing that does end up happening with MS, and when you do have a condition like MS, is that there will be certain things that might become a little too hard to do. There might be certain things that you feel like you can't do. Now, whether or not you can do them is a different story, but there are definitely things that you would have definitely thought that you wouldn't be able to do, and you might actually surprise yourself. And I'd say the only thing that is kind of between you and your goal at multiple times is just the hard work, right? Of course there are certain things that you know become close to impossible just because of the fact that there is actual damage happening, um, you know to the myelin, and as a result there will be certain things that might not really become possible. But there is something that does end up happening, which is that your mind is very elastic. It does have the ability to create certain connections that don't exist anymore because of certain damage, right? I mean, the same is sort of the same thing actually ends up happening if you become bedridden for a very long amount of time, where your muscles tend to atrophy, and then you have a much harder time, let's say, standing up or walking for that matter. um, so with that being said, it is always one thing to know your limits, know that there will be certain things that might not be possible, but don't ever sell yourself short. And don't ever think that just because you haven't been able to do something, that it isn't completely impossible until you at least try to see where your limits lie, right? And I know that both of these things that I'm saying kind of are counterindicative in a way, that I say that there are limits, but then don't underestimate yourself. And the whole thing is that if you are able to do certain things to a certain level, um, do keep trying that, do keep exercising, do keep pushing that limit that you've set to yourself, and try to see where that limit can take you. So never underestimate what your body's abilities are, because a lot of times the human body is actually a great thing and can actually surprise you from time to time. And very one very easy example is something that I did today, where I did not think it was possible for me to engage in the strenuous exercises that I was doing in the gym today. And those were, I mean, some of the exercises actually felt like they would be something that you know an athlete would do. And somehow, sure, it was difficult for me, but I was able to do them to a certain level. And even when I think of the fact that there was a time in the past where I could say do um, you know a hold a plank for about a minute or close to a minute, and then it went down where I was maybe holding it for 5 seconds 6 seconds max, and now I'm at least able to be comfortable for at least 20 seconds. So there is a certain level of improvement, so never underestimate what your body's abilities are. In fact, test your limits to actually see what are some things that your body can't do, because there is a certain level of damage. And just keep trying to find ways to maybe even overcome those. But of course, you know that does require a lot of dedication. But the big thing is that never underestimate what your abilities are. And of course, while I am posing this to a lot of patients of MS, a lot of patients that have definitely noticed or experienced exacerbation throughout their time with MS. Now, I'm not saying that practice is going to get you back to what you were before you were diagnosed or were experiencing the symptoms, but it is going to definitely surprise you as to how far you're going to go. And so my one the one really the one recommendation, the one um, advice I have to everyone is, do keep trying on a daily basis to see how you can make that day a little bit better. And you might be surprised at how far you can go with yourself and with your body. So with that said, that was my one lesson on what MS has taught me. Please do share your thoughts, please do share your insights, please do share your experiences where you probably surprise yourself as to what your body is capable of doing. um, and with that said, I do want to wish you a good night. I hope you have sweet dreams, and of course I will talk to you tomorrow. Bye.